Hi, it's attorney Merideth here. In our latest homeschool for realtors, we're going to talk about dun dun dun. How do you like that? The dangers of the as-is contract. So I'm going to date myself a little bit here. Back in my day, when I first became exposed to real estate law, the contract that everybody used is what we now call the standard purchase and sale agreement. It's funny to call it, we still call it the standard, although that's not an industry standard anymore. But in any event, that was the contract people used. And you really only used an as-is contract back in those days if you had a piece of property that was just in terrible condition and you didn't want to mess around with making any kind of concessions for repairs. Well, y'all remember we went through that terrible economic downturn when so much of our sales market was short sales. And we all got in the habit of writing our contracts on as-is contracts, because clearly if you were losing your house, you weren't going to spend a nickel to try to fix it up. So that practice took over, and it's continued, and it does puzzle me when I see it used so much. And so I feel like maybe there's a little educational gap that we need to fill in that I want to talk about today, and that is, when is it not a good idea to use an as-is contract? So the simple answer is, if you're the seller, it's probably not a good idea to have an as-is contract, and here's why. Under the as-is agreement, your buyer gets a free look at the property, and they can change their mind for any purpose, for any reason, or for no reason. In other words, they could find the house otherwise perfectly acceptable and they're just not in the mood to buy anymore. So in some ways, when I'm counseling my clients as an attorney, I'll explain to them that in some ways you're really not under contract, because that other party, yeah, sure, technically under contract, but that other party, the buyer in our circumstance, they can walk away at any time they want. They can put your property under contract and put 5 other properties under contract the same day. Choose the one that they want. So it's really a risk for you as the seller, because you really can't be firm and sure that you're going to be selling your house under that contract until that due diligence time that has passed, which is 15 days under the standard as-is contract unless it's shortened. The other thing that we're seeing happen, again, representing the seller, is if the buyer finds something wrong with the property, they're typically not willing to take the property as is, even though there is an as-is contract in place. They get their inspections done, and if they find things wrong with the property, then you know what they do. They come back to the seller and try to negotiate and say they want a price reduction, they want repairs done, and the seller says, wait, we have an as-is contract. I thought you were going to take it as is. To which the buyer will respond, well, you either take my deal as is, meaning you meet my requests, or I'm walking. So as you can see real quickly, the flip side to this question is, when is an as-is contract a great idea? Well, that's when you're the buyer, because putting that as-is contract in really doesn't nail you down to anything at all. And now let's contrast the standard purchase and sale agreement. Now remember, we talked about this is the kind of agreement that is called standard because it used to be the standard. It no longer is in our area. But under that purchase agreement, the parties decide at the outset of the contract a maximum amount that the seller is willing to pay towards repairs. And if the repairs that are discovered by the buyer can be performed for up to or less than that maximum amount, the buyer cannot cancel the contract. Also, if you use the standard purchase agreement, they can only cancel the contract for a very limited number of reasons having to do with the condition of the property. They can't just change their mind as you can do with the standard as-is contract. So if someone goes under contract with an as-is contract and they decide they don't want the house anymore, even if it's in perfect condition because they found something they like better, then they can just cancel if that's within their inspection period. If you are under the standard contract and they decide that the house is acceptable but they just don't want to buy it anymore, they're not going to get their deposit back. So as you can imagine then, if you are the seller, the standard purchase contract can be the one that works best for you. I think the key always, when you're submitting contracts on behalf of your buyers and when you're considering them on behalf of your sellers, just know that one size doesn't fit all. Lately, it's been a tremendous buyer's market, and I know that some sellers are looking more favorably on the standard purchase agreement because they know what I'm speaking about when I say that the buyer could walk away. Some buyers want to always give themselves the ability to change their mind during that due diligence period, and so they're going to want to always submit on the as-is contract. But some of them may say, hey, my contract looks a little stronger if I submit it on the standard agreement, so that's what I'll do. The as-is contract does have a little language in it that the standard contract does not, that relieves the broker of liability if there is problems with the property. If that's a reason that you as a realtor use that contract, give me a call because we can address those issues separately and better than just using the contract for that particular purpose. So I guess the bottom line is pay attention to the details of the transaction and know your contracts. Know which one you want to use and why. That's part of your job because, you know, obviously your buyer or your seller, they don't have experience in any of these issues and they're going to basically just look at whatever form you give them. So have these conversations. And remember what we've talked about in other areas, other homeschool for realtors, about documenting your file to protect yourself. It's a great idea to have this be a part of your standard practice to explain the different contracts to your seller and to your buyer. And then just make a note in your file that you've done that, or just have some paperwork or something that evidences that that's part of your practice. If they later say, well, wait, you didn't tell me that this would happen, you've got proof that you did tell them the effect of the contract that they choose either to accept or the contract they choose to submit. So as usual, if you have any questions about your contract, about what contract might be the best to use under the circumstances, even if it's not closing in my office, please don't hesitate to give me a call. I'd love to help you out, answer your questions, make sure you're educated. I can be reached at 352-394-7408. So the takeaway is this: know your contract and know which one you're using and why. Thank you for listening.